Let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works. This is the calling of every believer and the heartbeat of this podcast. You're listening to Let Us Consider, where we turn to the Bible, theology, and the life of the church to strengthen our faith and encourage one another in Christ. And welcome back. We are today in Genesis chapter 12. These are fantastic chapters. Chapters that we've really been waiting for. These start off some discussion of the Abrahamic covenant, although you do not find the Abrahamic covenant proper until Genesis 15. And so when there's not the technical making the covenant moment, I often call it intention for the covenant. This is what God is going to do with the covenant that he makes in Genesis 15. And so let's just jump right in. Genesis chapter 12. Now the Lord said to Abram. And in chapter 11, we left off with Abram at Haran. Remember that he and his family all left Ur and were going to Haran. And then chapter 12, now the Lord said to Abram, this is after Abram's fathers died, now the Lord says, go forth from your country, from your relatives, and from your father's house, to the land which I will show you. Now note all of the I wills. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you, and make your name great, and so you shall be a blessing, and I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. So there's a lot there to unpack, and we really don't have the time to unpack all of it, but let me try to unpack as much as I can here before we need to move on. So go forth from your country, from your relatives, from your father's house. Right? Go forth from everything that you know. Go forth from your comfort zone, and go to this land that I'm going to show you. And I'm going to make you, first of all, a great nation. So you know that Abram and Sarai were barren. Sarai could have no children, and so they had no descendants. In fact, for quite a while, they're still not going to have descendants, but yet this is the first thing that God is telling them. I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you, and your name is going to be great. Now, all of this is mirroring the I wills in chapter 11, where the people at the Tower of Babel said, we will, we will, we will, we will. Now God is saying, I will. And he's going to do this through this man, Abram, who becomes Abraham. And so if I go back and forth between Abram and Abraham even now, before his name is changed, forgive me, it's really hard to not say Abraham. But to this man, God is promising this great blessing, a great name. And so he says, you shall be a blessing. And he says then, I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you, I will curse. And in you, I want you to notice this, all the families of the earth, that is, all of the nations, will be blessed. Now, at this point, there is no distinction between Jew and Gentile because the nation of Israel had not come into existence. That's what God is promising here. There will be the nation of Israel. So there's not this distinction between Israel and nations, but God is promising that Abraham will bring blessing to all the nations. And the nation that comes forth from Abraham, whoever blesses that nation is going to be blessed. Whoever curses that nation is going to be cursed. And then if you want to go even further, the seed that will come out of the nation, the Christ, whoever blesses him will be blessed, and whoever curses him will be blessed. And it's actually through the Christ that all the families of the earth will be blessed. And so there's already some distinction here. Some of that will come later, and then some of it will come much later in the prophets and then in the Gospels and the epistles. But for now, I hope you see that. This is God's plan then for the nations. God made the covenant with Noah in chapter 9, wherein the earth is sworn perpetuity, right? As Jeremiah says, if you can break my covenant with the day and the night, then you could also break this covenant with Abraham and then later on Isaac and Jacob. And so God is swearing, well, not yet, but this is laying the foundation for what's going to happen in the Abrahamic covenant. This is what God is saying that he is going to do. And all of this has to do with the nations, and specifically blessing to the nations. If you wonder how the blessing from Eden will be returned to all of the world, it's going to be through Abraham, through the nation who comes from him, and through the seed of Abraham, the Christ. So, verse 4, Abram went forth as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. Now Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. And even understanding that they lived just a little bit longer, lifespans are dwindling at this point, probably because of the atmosphere just after the flood. And you see that 75 is still already fairly old. Okay? So God's promising, and in his old age, he is going to have a child. And actually, God's going to wait until, according to Romans, Paul says Abraham's body was as good as dead. He was way past the time of childbearing. Sarah was well past the time of childbearing. But already he's 75 years old. And look what he does. He believes. He goes. And he obeys the Lord. Departs from Haran. Took Sarai his wife, Lot his nephew, all their possessions which they had accumulated, the persons which they had acquired in Haran, and they set out from the land of Canaan. Thus they came to the land of Canaan. Abram passed through the land as far as the site of Shechem to the oak of Moreh. Now the Canaanite was then in the land. And the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your descendants I will give this land." And so this is the land that he was bringing Abram to, the land that he was promising to all of his descendants. And so Abram built the altar there to the Lord who appeared to him. And then verse 8, he proceeded from there to the mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed on, continuing toward the Negev. And verse 10 says there was a famine in the land. So Abram didn't stay in the land of Canaan, but he went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. And in many ways, Abraham foreshadows what's going to happen to the people of Israel. They're going to go down in a time of famine, the family of Jacob. And likewise, Abraham, long before them, goes down in that way to escape a famine. Now, Egypt was kind of, sort of, famine-proof, in that Egypt really relied on the Nile. And they didn't really get a lot of rain, but they relied on the rains that fed the Nile, and then the Nile would come through the land. So Egypt wasn't famine-proof necessarily, but the Nile really was a great help to them. One of the reasons that the Nile was itself considered a god in Egypt. Of course, that's foolishness. Now, where are we? Verse 10, the famine was severe in the land. Verse 11, it came about when he came near to Egypt that he said to Sarai his wife, "See now, I know that you are a beautiful woman. And when the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife.' And they will kill me, but they will let you live. Please say that you are my sister, so that it may go well with me because of you, and that I may live on account of you." I mean, this is a man who just hasn't trusted in the Lord in the way that he's going to. But he's a man who's sinful like we are. And he has a lot of trust issues like we do. And so here he's not really trusting the Lord. But he goes down to Egypt and he tries to survive by his own cunning and wit. And so he falls into deception. And this, of course, brings about kind of something bad. It comes about, Abraham came to Egypt. The Egyptians saw the woman was very beautiful. Pharaoh's officials saw her and praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. Therefore he treated Abram well for her sake, and gave him sheep and oxen and donkeys and male and female servants, female donkeys and camels. But the Lord struck Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. Then Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What is this you've done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her for my wife? Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go." And then Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they escorted him away with his wife and all that belonged to him. And so then, verse chapter 13, Abram went up to Egypt, to the Negev, he and his wife and all that belonged to him, and Lot with him. Now Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver and in gold. He'd been greatly enriched while he was in Egypt on account of his lie. And so, verse 3, he went on his journeys from the Negev as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai. By the way, if I remember right, Bethel is 10 miles north of where Jerusalem is. And so he's there between Bethel and Ai, to the place of the altar which he had made there formerly, and there Abram called on the name of the Lord. Now Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, and the land could not sustain them while dwelling together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to remain together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. Now the Canaanite and the Perizzite were dwelling then in the land. So Abram said to Lot, "Please, let there be no strife between you and me, nor between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brothers. Is not the whole land before you? Please separate from me. If I go to the left, then I will go to the right. Or if to the right, then I will go to the left." So Lot lifted up his eyes and saw all the valley of the Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere. And this is before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. It was like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as you go to Zoar. So Lot chose for himself all the valley of the Jordan, and Lot journeyed eastward. Thus they separated from each other. Abraham settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled in the cities of the valley and moved his tents as far as Sodom. Now we get this note here, verse 13, the men of Sodom were wicked exceedingly and sinners against the Lord. That's going to be kind of the background for when we get to chapters 18 and 19 for us to understand that that wasn't something that was new then. That was something that was already ongoing. And you see this, Lot looked with his eyes, and he chose what seemed to be the most fertile, beautiful kind of paradise that he could find. And then Abram, of course, took what Lot didn't and went the other way. And Lot ended up then moving closer and closer and finally into Sodom, where he became in danger of being swept away with those wicked men. And we're told very explicitly in 2 Peter that Lot was a righteous man who struggled hard against all the ways of the people of Sodom. Verse 14, the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, "Now lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land which you see, I will give it to you and to your descendants forever." You should mark that word forever. In fact, if you want to do a really interesting study, just mark all of the times that the land appears. And it's going to be a lot. The land is going to be a central focus of the covenant. Actually, the land is going to be the focus of the covenant, but the land is going to be a central focus of all the Torah, and then all of the Old Testament, certainly. All right, verse 16. We're back to the I wills. I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if anyone can number the dust of the earth, then your descendants can also be numbered. Arise, walk about the land through its length and breadth, for I will give it to you. Then Abram moved his tent and came and dwelt by the oaks of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. Now, notice at this point, Abram still has no parcel of the land. nothing belongs to him. He has no son, and he has no piece of land. And so he's just taking the Lord at his word that he is indeed going to do this. Let's go on into chapter 14. Kind of a fun chapter here. You get the first war in the Bible, by the way, and it's really just kind of a side note here, because the focus is going to be on Abram. But it came about in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goim, that they made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and with Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, and Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. And all these came as allies to the valley of Siddim, that is the Salt Sea. That's what we know as the Dead Sea. 12 years they had served Chedorlaomer, but the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him came and defeated the Rephaim and Ashtaroth Karnaim, and the Zuzim and Ham, and the Emim and Shaveh Kiriathaim, and the Horites and their Mount Seir, as far as El Paran, which is by the wilderness, and they turned back and came to En Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and conquered all the country of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites, who lived in Hazazon Tamar. And the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar, came out, and they arrayed for battle against them in the valley of Siddim, against Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goim, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. Now, let me help you kind of just understand what all of that said there. So there were these kings in Canaan who were vassals of these other kings. And they served him for 12 years. That is, they sent tribute for 12 years and did all of the things that were commanded of them. But then they rebelled in the 13th year. And so a year goes by after not sending the tribute to these kings, that the 14th year comes about, and they come and they defeat some people, and then they come around and they array themselves for battle against these rebel kings of Canaan. All right? And so you have these coming together for battle because these kings of Canaan had rebelled against these other kings. And so, verse 11, they took all the goods of, verse 10. Now the valley of Siddim was full of tar pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. And apparently they don't know their own country, but they fell into the tar pits. And those who survived fled to the hill country. Then they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah, and all their food supply, and departed. These kings were going back to their own territory. Verse 12, they also took Lot, Abram's nephew, and his possessions, and departed, for he was living in Sodom. And this is the whole point, really, in us knowing about this war, because otherwise we wouldn't. Because now Lot has been captured, and Abram has to get involved. And so verse 13, a fugitive came and told Abram the Hebrew. Now he was living by the oaks of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, brother of Aner, and these were allies with Abram. When Abram heard that his relative had been taken captive, he led out his trained men, born in his house, 318, and went in pursuit as far as Dan, which is an anachronism probably, because Dan was later in the north. Dan, you remember in the book of Judges, goes up and takes a town that they were not supposed to take in rebellion to the Lord, because they couldn't capture their own territory that the Lord had given them. And so usually Dan is thought of as the farthest north in the land of Israel. So you have this anachronism written here that Abram went as far as there, as far north as you can think of in the land of Israel. And he divided his forces against them by night, he and his servants, and defeated them, and pursued them as far as Hova, which is north of Damascus, which I forget exactly how far that is. It's at least 60 miles. And so you have this rather old man chasing this army a good 60 miles, probably more. And he's pursuing them, and he, verse 16, brought back all the goods, and also brought back his relative Lot with his possessions, and also the women and the people. And then verse 17, after his return from the defeat of Chedorlaomer, And the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom, went out to meet him at the valley of Shaveh, that is the king's valley. Okay, and you get this really, really important statement here. And Melchizedek. Okay, I know it's usually said Melchizedek. I'm not trying to be pedantic here, but I pronounce it this way so you can hear the Hebrew. Melchizedek. It means king of righteousness. Melchi, king, and Zedek is righteousness. Melchizedek, the king of Salem, and Salem means peace. Later it will be known as Jerusalem. So here we have the king of righteousness, that is of the city of peace, the king of peace. He brought out bread and wine, and now it says he was a priest of God Most High. And so you have this king priest coming out to serve God Most High and to bless Abraham. So verse 19, he blessed him and said, "Blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand." And Abraham gave him a tenth of all. And the author of Hebrews is, of course, going to expound upon this. Psalm 110, of course, takes this along the way, and then it's taken up. And so we see a picture of Christ here, the King of righteousness, the King of peace, who will be a king priest in Jerusalem, who will bless and be blessed. All right, so Abram said to the king of Sodom, who said to him in verse 21, "Give the people to me and take the goods yourself." That's what the king said. Abram said in verse 22, "I have sworn to Yahweh, God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take a thread or a sandal thong or anything that is yours, for fear that you would say, 'I have made Abram rich.' I will take nothing except what the young men have eaten, and the share of the men who went with me. Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their share." And so Abram, according to his word to the Lord, his oath to the Lord, did not take anything out of the booty except just asked that the people be returned. And then, of course, that the people that went with him, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, to get their share of everything. So Abram takes nothing. No king can say that he made Abram rich. It's only the Lord who has enriched Abram. And so God is protecting Abram through all of this. And we'll pick up there next time in chapter 15. And that will be the Abrahamic covenant proper. And there's actually quite a bit more that will go with that, but we'll stop there. Thank you for listening. I hope to be with you next time. Thank you for listening to Let Us Consider. If this podcast has been a blessing, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps others discover the truth of God's Word. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.